Welcome back to the Survivor Global Show. I am joined today by Australian Survivor royalty because how often do you get someone with three nicknames? A lot of players struggle to get one nickname, and he's known by Dirty Harry, the Cockroach, and also the Houdini of Australian Survivor. Harry Hills, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, good. Thanks for that intro. I don't think I've heard Harry Houdini in a long time. Yeah, things have been good. Been making ice cream today. Just been chilling out. It's going to be exciting going back and talking about champions versus contenders too, because it's been a long time now. It's been like 2 years, I think, since we filmed it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that you're sort of the Houdini part really stood out for me is because I've just recently done a rewatch of Champions versus
Mm.
Contenders 2, and I try to get more and more US fans into watching Australian Survivor recently. One of them being Adam Jumba, like I've mentioned to you just prior to the
Mm.
podcast, who's the creative director for the podcast. And, he obviously had Russell Hantz who came on the show, and Russell Hantz have not been a fan of Australian Survivor because he got voted out very early on. So he's been a bit sour about that. And Adam didn't really want to watch it based on him having that close relationship with Russell. But he then
Yeah.
watched your season, and he ranked your season in the top 10 of all
Oh,
Survivor seasons, even all the US Survivor seasons. So he had a really high
there you
opinion of
go.
it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people have like a love-hate relationship with our season. Like I can fully understand some of the weaknesses that people acknowledge. But it's also like I think there was a lot of good players in there. I think like out of all the just like seasons that have like newbies, ours obviously had one non-newbie, but I think out of all of them, we had a lot of really good first-time players.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that watching your season for the second time, because that was my second time watching it. Maybe I watched it like a third time, but not like actively watching it with a podcast sort of mindset on it. And we
Mm.
recapped every single one of those episodes, myself and Riley, who's my co-host over in Sydney, and then also one of my co-hosts, Jake, who's over in the US. And
Mm.
watching it, I really had a much higher opinion, firstly, of Pierre's game, watching it the second time, and also of the
Mm.
season as a whole. But it's not just because my opinion of Pierre's game went up that I actually enjoyed the season. It's also because I believe that you had an extremely well-balanced cast, and it was up in the air until the end as to who was going to win. I feel like All Stars, you kind of knew the gig was up like towards the end because David had such a overwhelming edit in that season.
Hmm. I think, yeah, if you're looking at champions versus contenders too, it was really up in the air and things changed really rapidly. It wasn't the same as All Stars. All Stars felt very like blocky and you knew what to kind of expect with like these long waiting periods. Like even if you were going to tribal, you kind of knew like what the gist would be. But champions versus contenders, you knew that if any one person in the end game left, it would completely reshuffle the rest of the people. And so it was like really crazy actually trying to get yourself to the top at the end. I know that everyone kind of like was trying to do that, just like make sure you get yourself to the top at the end. So it was really interesting. Things like Janine sort of going at 6 because like we couldn't really get Luke, and then Abby going because Luke was specifically threatened by her, and just all sorts of interesting stuff in the end game.
Yeah, and talking about that specifically, PR going there, really putting. Obviously, you guys would have done a lot of that work as well. That obviously everything can't make the TV show, but I really picked up on the things where PR put a lot of doubt in his mind about Abby potentially winning a challenge towards the end, which I'm sure more of you would have had those same conversations with him as well. And also Pia saving herself in the beginning of the game when she was on the outs and still being willing to go work with the people who voted against her. There were certain subtle things about Pia's game that I picked up that I respected so much more watching it the second time. And especially, your Survivor career was quite volatile because in both seasons, you were always on the outs. You were always sort of seen as being on the bottom on the edit, and you had to fight from the bottom. But one of the things that stood out for me about your game is that you remained extremely calm and always had an extremely positive outlook on even being at the bottom. And I was always sort of fascinated. What made you so calm in those moments where you were getting sniped at? You were obviously sniping back, but you never lost your cool in those moments.
I guess it's just down to like logical reasoning. Like you're never going to gain anything by getting upset about something. You're never going to gain anything by being angry. Like, yes, you can kind of like attack people and go after them. Like you can kind of go to tribal and really be aggressive with your words and how you're framing things. But there's no point actually being like outwardly angry about things, because you just got to put people off. Like you need to balance a little bit of social stuff with strategic. Like my game kind of like changed a lot as it went along, because I went from wanting to be just crazy and have fun, like because I'd finally got on the show that I love, to like having a shot at actually winning. And then I kind of took it a little bit more seriously, but still being pretty aggressive. I don't know. There's just no point in being like frazzled. There's no point in being like angry about it. I guess like part of me just doesn't care as well. Like I'm pretty chill about that kind of stuff. Like there was one point where it was Dave that we were really putting up to go home. And obviously it was a plan that kind of stemmed from Pia, but I was definitely on board with it. At that point, David was the person that I was furthest away from. And they told me and Daisy basically that like there was the potential the votes would be on us. And I was just like, yeah, fine. Like I was like, am I going to get the most votes? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, I don't care then. Like I have my name brought up at like every single tribal. It only matters if you have the most votes. That's the only thing. And obviously Dave did have an idol, but I actually think that me and Daisy's acting during that tribal is underrated, particularly Daisy's, who's not great at acting all the time, but in that particular case, she was really good. So I think it just pays to be more chill. If you're more chilled, people want to work with you as well. Like if you don't snitch on people's plans, if you don't freak out, people are drawn to that. Like especially like you're playing with a lot of mature people. Like it's in Survivor, like you don't see a lot of 18-year-olds. You don't necessarily see a lot of young 20-year-olds. Like Baden was one of the youngest in our season, and he's not that young. So a lot of people are very mature. So I guess if you just chill and kind of look at things logically, take your time, patience, people start to see that and see it as valuable, basically.
No, 100%. Now, I do want to go back sort of right to the beginning of your Survivor journey and talk a little bit about, you being a fan of the show. You've mentioned that before, and you've mentioned that, Nick Wilson, obviously in the show came up, that he was someone you looked up to, and you had the little stick in your mouth that was like a tribute to Nick Wilson's game. And I did do a little bit of homework, so I picked up that Nick Wilson, you really admired that he played the game with a lot of fun and, had fun while he was out there. Who else sort of in Survivor US do you admire as players, and did you take anything else from other players and try to bring that into your game when you went out there to play it the first time as well?
I stole a bunch of stuff from other players. I'll be honest, like I stole quite a few things, like the fact that the stick was just one. And obviously that goes beyond Nick. Like it wasn't just his thing. There's plenty of other players. Like even in that season, I'm pretty sure Davey used the stick as well, and like a whole bunch of other players. But I just really like the fun elements. People that name all of their groups, I thought that was really cool, and I did that like straight away. I used to sort of like have the stick because I wanted like this character, because that's what I really like on the show. Like when I was a kid, I grew up, I watched like Johnny Fairplay, I watched Boston Rob, like there's Rupert, and it's like they were more than just random people on the show. Like they actually had these like characters to them. It's almost like wrestling in a way. Like if like a 10-year-old can explain your character, then it's a good character. Like if they can get that. And it's like, that's the sort of thing for Johnny Fairplay. He's sort of like this dude that would kind of be cutthroat and do anything to win, but have a little bit of fun at the same time. And so, yeah, I came into the game just trying to do that. So obviously I made up like the Oscar lie. That was, I guess, kind of my own, but it's almost like a Johnny Fairplay thing. The stick thing, which is just kind of like a general American Survivor reference. Nicknames, which is something that I think is just everywhere in American Survivor now. I think everyone just does it automatically because it's more fun. And Nick is like definitely up there as my favorite, just because I think it is underrated people that can have fun on that island. Like there's some people that are just sticks in the mud and you don't want to play with them after a while because they're just boring. They're not having fun. And Luke is probably the king of that. Like he's probably the best I've ever seen. But I tried to bring that as well, like the actual having fun part. And I think it was the sort of thing that made Ross like me quite a lot, was because we actually had a lot of fun together. And you start to be able to kind of turn people that way, because that's a part of social gaming, is if you're more fun than someone else, of course, they're going to try and keep you in there because the other people are boring.
No, I agree. And it's funny enough, like one of the players that mentioned that quite early on in the US Survivors, one that you would never think would mention it, and it was Colby Donaldson. I think in Heroes vs. Villains, that when they voted out Sugar, he said that you needed people around them that actually want to have fun, so you keep them around. And then he ended up being a bit of a difficult person to drag along towards the end, because he got really demotivated in that game as well.
Yeah, and it's a thing that comes up, like, and that's something that is difficult to actually articulate on TV. Like, unless they have like an obvious injury or something that's really like visual that you can like pinpoint. If someone's just being boring or annoying in general, like, it's hard to actually put on TV as like a reason why. But it's a reason you can go above them in a ranking. Like, if you're sort of on the bottom and there's a couple of you there and they're trying to pick, they're just going to pick the person that's most annoying, probably.
Now, you brought up a few interesting things here. When I was talking to Adam Jumba at the end of your season, in the sort of retrospective of the whole Champions versus Contenders 2, we made the comparison with your season 2 Pearl Islands, and we said, you could easily see Lil being Baden, we could easily see Pierre being Sandra, we could easily see Harry being Johnny Fairplay, and Luke being Rupert. I do think that Luke had, a lot more strategic chops than what Rupert had, but he was also this bigger-than-life character that everybody loved. So there was a lot of comparisons, and it's a good thing when you get compared to that season, because a lot of Survivor diehards and fans really love Pearl Islands as well. So
yeah, amazing season. I haven't had that exact crossover made. Obviously, there's like connections you can make. Pia is relatively similar to Sandra. I mean, there's like this really, really good social game, solid strategic game behind it, and then doesn't really care that much about challenges. That's pretty similar. I think, yeah, I would say they're just as good. If, like, obviously Pia hasn't had the chance to play twice and win twice, but I would put Pia up in that realm. Like, she is that good, and I don't think the TV really got a chance to show it that well. Me and Luke were hogging up a lot of airtime. So she didn't get to show it that much. Social game's hard, but yeah, I would put her up in that realm. And I don't know about the Lil and Baden comparison. That might be a little bit rough on Baden.
I understand, and obviously we didn't see a lot of Baden's game. We saw certain bits of it, but again, it might have been a difficult game to sort of show on TV, like you've mentioned. And I think you being close to Baden, you kind of took over most of the screen time, and it was shown as you making most of those strategic decisions for the both of you at the post-merge stage of the game. Now, one of the things I was wondering about, you mentioned that you were sort of this lovable villain, really, and that's how you came across. You were like this lovable villain because you were this unique villain. Johnny Fairplay pretty much ran most of his season. He was in control of his side throughout the game, but you were a lot of the times the underdog as well, which made you someone that you wanted to shout for even more. What was fan reception like in Australia? Like, after the show, did people gravitate towards you? Did people hold it against you that you lied about Oscar and those kind of things, or did people forget about it?
It was love-hate. I think mostly love. I just remember one day where I did sit on the beach, and I just knew that there was no way for the producers to make me be the bad guy. Like, it was just impossible, because I think it was like, at this point I played like 2 idols and it was like 5 versus 1, and I'm just like, there's no way they're going to be able to make people hate me in this situation. Like, it's just not possible. I'm like the underdog, and I know Australians love the underdog. But yeah, I played the whole game as the underdog, and it actually was really fun that way, because it was very exciting. You were sort of on edge. I didn't really sleep a lot for like the first like good 30 days. Like, I still didn't sleep that much after that, but like the first 30 days was just like Harry on edge. And in retrospect, like, I have very fond memories of that. It probably would have been good if I could have controlled the game better, but I still nearly won with that kind of with a look like, I mean, obviously there's a bit of luck in there as well, but I feel like I very, very often did the best with what I was given.
Yeah, I think your gameplay, the way you played from below, and having to fight your way back to the top, the three different nicknames you got throughout the season, the lie about Oscar, and just being someone that you could truly see enjoying playing the game, and being villainous within the boundaries of the game. I think some people take it further than just the game. You clearly didn't come across that way. So I do feel like you're someone that's going to be remembered. And I feel like you're a shoe-in to be called back in the future. Now, I do want to have a question for you here, because I know, and we'll talk about how close, because obviously it was a 6-week period between your two seasons when you played. If, Survivor were to come back to you and they asked you to pick up the torch again, which one of these three themes would be the most sort of appealing to you to come back to? So, you've got Heroes versus Villains, the first one over in Australian Survivor. You've got Blood versus Water, or you've got International versus US Survivor. Which one would be the most appealing for you to come back in?
Oh, International for sure. Like, there would be such a bigger, pedestal that the game is put on, and it's like a lot more eyes on Australian Survivor. I think it's just good for everyone. Like, the players would want that challenge and they would probably bring it. And then to have that many more viewers tuning in to get that audience, I'm sure the producers would be all over it if they could. I think it would be just fantastic. And you can imagine, again, to go back to wrestling, it's it would be that kind of thing, because it's you see all of a sudden all these things crossing over, and it'd just be the ultimate crossover. I mean, I would want to play with a whole bunch of them. Even the people that you don't necessarily put up there as being the huge superstars. There's players out there that I would love to play with. They're fan favorites, players like Christian, who seem like a whole lot of fun. Pretty much anyone from David vs. Goliath, pretty much anyone from Millennials vs. Gen X seems like an absolute blast. And even some of the more recent seasons. I mean, was it Lauren Rimmer? Was I love Lauren Rimmer, and I thought she was the best. And if she rocked up on a beach opposite me, I would just be losing it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, who would you like to see out there represent the Australian Survivor franchise with you? If you could choose one male and one female there to come with you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. In fact, let's not make it your Little Rascals alliance, because I know you probably gravitate towards Shawnee. Everybody wants to see Shawnee come back, but if you had to choose two other players out there, who would it be?
That's a very loaded question, because it's part of me wants the season to be amazing. So I could just pick the biggest players, or I could pick people that just benefit myself. I would want to see Janine there, because I think that she needs a second shot. I don't know if she ever would say yes. Maybe if it was the international one, but Janine needs to play again. She's amazing, and she deserves another shot at it. Who else? Need one male. There's the obvious ones. I love
Luke or David. Yeah, the two obvious ones. But if you had to go sort of left field on it,
deeper, I would personally love to see Andy play again. I think that he was doing the similar thing to me, where it was you're on Survivor, you've wanted to be on it your whole life, and now you're gonna just go crazy. And I think a lot of it just came down to bad luck, that he was the Survivor fan that got the bad edit, and I was the Survivor fan that got the good edit. And yes, some of the stuff I was doing was also successful, and probably a little bit more entertaining because it came off, but we were sort of the same sort of vibe, especially the first 2 weeks going in. We were the people that wanted to be the lovable bad guy, and he just copped a little bit of a bad edit. And part of that was also because he was unsuccessful, and also because they didn't show the whole storyline that involved me, him, and Sammy being very much against Daisy and Sean, and they didn't show that. So it just makes his targeting Daisy over and over seem really stupid, but really he was just trying to get revenge and have this awesome revenge arc, but none of that got shown.
Yeah. One person that I did want to ask you, and then we'll move back to you because I don't want to ask you too much about other players that you played with necessarily. But, Sammy is someone that to me was quite fascinating because, we didn't see a single confessional from her throughout the whole season that she played. She's the first Survivor player ever in any version not
Yeah.
to get a single confessional. And, I'm aware that she was with you and Andy and I believe Casey there in the beginning of the show, and there was an alliance that never made the show. How much of a driving force was she in that? And, can you shine some light on maybe sort of what her game was like since no one actually got to see it?
Yeah. Yeah. Cash money. So 30 seconds into day one, the first time we like split after being like this group, we all split up to get stuff like bamboo, firewood, that sort of stuff. Me and Sammy went to the same piece of bamboo, and in like 30 seconds, I was like, "Do you want to form an alliance?" She's like, "Yep, form an alliance right now." And it was literally that quick. And she was actually amazing because she was kind of like my filter. Like, obviously, it didn't work as well as it should have because everyone thought that I was like really threatening by like a weekend and wanted to get rid of me. But yeah, she sort of acted like a filter. It was kind of day 2 and day 3. I was being like a little bit crazy and going to too many people and talking a lot of strategy. And she kind of like reeled me in. We started doing things a lot smarter. We made the alliance with Casey and Andy, where we could actually sort of get intel from everyone. And it was a really good alliance, in my opinion. I think if we had a chance to like test it early, then it would have got solidified because obviously I had the reputation of being very untrustworthy. So it would have been good to actually have a chance to just demonstrate the trust. And I just didn't understand that side of the game very well going in. Like I was just like in my mind, I was like, well, this is the alliance. But you realize that no, these people are paranoid and like it's not the alliance until you lock in the alliance. So Sammy was a fantastic smart player with that side of things, where it was a lot of patience, it was a lot of like intelligent, thought out decisions. And so she was like the perfect filter for me, who was just crazy. And so day 3, she kind of like started really helping me with that stuff. We were definitely anti Daisy and Sean. We were trying to get rid of Daisy because me, Sammy, and Daisy had an alliance that then kind of got broken up, or it was just obvious Daisy wasn't interested in being with us. So we were just like, well, we're going to get rid of you, which Daisy overheard. So I would say as a player, she was just very smart and very patient. I think that would be the defining things. And I think it was a bit sad that she didn't actually get to have anything shown. I mean, it's like the thing that I point out is that like when everyone was playing cricket and they kind of showed that, like we were looking for idols for like 4 hours straight while they played cricket and like just did silly things. It's like we were playing the game hard. So yeah, it was a little bit weird and a little bit frustrating for me to see that she got basically no edit at all. Like I don't know whether she made someone mad or something like that, but that's the breaks.
Now, that's a great answer to that, and it's good to know a little bit more about her game because I've always just wondered, like she looked like she could be quite capable, but we just never saw it on the show. Now I want to turn it back to you. Now, one of my favorite scenes that you were involved in was with you and Baden and Luke, where you go the night after David gets blindsided and Luke is quite angry about it, and you get the rice, you get the pot, and you go make some rice on the side, and you eat the rice on your own. What 2 questions here? Firstly, did anybody find out that there was some rice missing? And then secondly, how much did this work with Luke ingratiating himself within your group and you're thinking about wanting to keep Luke close moving forward in the game at that stage?
Oh man, I was so stoked. So like obviously I'd gone from like this like really tense place of like them wanting to get rid of me to final 12 where all of a sudden like no one really cared anymore. Like as far as Pierre and Janine were concerned, I was the extra number they needed when champions needed to turn on champions. That's why like I wasn't at the top of the list, was because they kind of I'd explained my situation and that I was basically this spare number, and so I was actually very valuable for if any heat came their way. So I guess like that moment in particular, like it was more a personal thing because it kind of like brought the fun side of the game back. It was just amazing though because it kind of came out of nowhere. Like Luke was pissed off, and we're on the beach. As people that generally stayed up late were me, Baden, and Luke, and he just like straight away was just like he just kept upping the ante because we were just going to steal some fruit, and then we stole the fruit, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was okay. And then he's like, do you just like want to steal a whole lot of rice? And I was just like, hell yes, like that is a great idea. And the whole process of it was just so funny because we literally built an entire fire up in the area where we kind of like would walk out to challenges. And it's actually the side of where Champions vs Contenders 1 had their camp as well. And so like we built the whole thing. Luke literally put in a seashell like the fire and like ran it the whole way up the beach. And I was so surprised that no one knew what we were doing. No one got up, no one checked on us. Like it was literally like we stole all the cooking equipment, the rice, made a whole fire, and we made a rice fight. It was like 12 people we made rice for. Like, and me and Luke literally had to stop because we were too full, and Baden just kept eating. He like ate everything. And then no one actually found out about it. And it was a good thing. I went back really early in the morning at sunrise and cleaned it all up. And it was a good thing I did because it was so obvious at that time. But I cleaned it up, and yeah, no one knew. And they ran out of rice completely for about a day and a bit because of it. And they just, because the producers actually mess with you a little bit, like they change the like refills on rice and stuff just to like mess with your head a little bit. Sometimes you like run out, and sometimes you don't. It's just to really keep you on edge. But they just thought maybe it was like a miss rationing. And it was really funny because that's the day that I went to a reward. So I didn't even miss out on food. Like I had a great time. And Baden and Simon apparently had this big fight about it. And they only found out after they were getting booted out what actually happened. And I just thought that was so funny.
Yeah, it was a great TV moment and something I really enjoyed watching, and it's a classic Luke move to do things like that in those seasons that he's played as well. Something else that sort of came up with you mentioning that you walked towards where the challenges were and that it was close to where the other camp was. I didn't realize that you could walk in between camps. Were the production team preventing you from just walking up to the other camp, or how does that work in the season?
No, I mean Champions vs Contenders 1. They had their camp on the exact same stretch of beach, and actually All Stars had Makuto was on the same beach as well. It's a massive inlet, and so Champions vs Contenders 1 is like dead in the middle. Champions vs Contenders 2 is all the way at one end, and then All Stars all the way at the other. So everything had obviously been cleared, but yeah, it was like the actual spot of Champions vs Contenders 1, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that's
but
awesome.
as for other camps, the way it kind of works is there's one really good beach at that inlet because you're kind of protected a bit more from the weather and stuff. Not when there's big storms, like then it still sucks. But the other beach got horrendous wind, and so in Champions vs Contenders 2, like the first few days were horrifying because we were so cold. Like the first night without fire was horrible. It's like a proper cold wind, and you just can't get warm at all. And then even after that, it would like blow. It would blow smoke. It would blow fire. There was one night that actually, like me and Ross accidentally set the bush on fire because the wind was so strong. Like we'd made this bonfire, and sparks flew off and started hitting other things, and we had to like. The night cameraman basically just turned the camera off and was like, you have to put out the fire right now that's in that bush. Otherwise, like, we're going to burn the jungle down. And so we're literally like running around. I grabbed the pot. I think Ross peed on some of the fire. And it was just hilarious and crazy. And it's just one of those things that doesn't make the edit. It wasn't filmed at all because we were like actually in danger.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust Ross near the fire. He kept burning his socks and his shoes as well. So
he loved big fires. He had like a weird obsession with massive just junk fires.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you is that, you were really good at finding hidden immunity idols, obviously, in your first season. And I did see there was one of those questions where it asked if you looked in both seasons, and you said you did. You probably looked a little bit less in your second season compared to your
Yeah,
first season. My question isn't about that. My question is more if you had to do a Ben Driebergen and coach someone else on how to find idols,
I'll find
what
it.
would be your advice for players when they go out there? What should they look out for to find idols? Did you have a
Um,
method to the madness?
I didn't have a method to start with, and then I slowly kind of learned. One, there's no point watching the cameraman anymore because they basically know when you're doing that and they'll start messing with you. They used to do that to me. Like they would do the classic, like you walk past the camera and then they would like zoom, like they'd go like that on a tree, and then I'd run back and check the tree and they'd just laugh at me. So don't bother doing that anymore because like the producers know about that. That's old news. What I would say is don't go randomly into the jungle. An idol would probably be in somewhere where the cameraman can actually film you getting it. Because if it's randomly, like at the start, we were spending like 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, and going through like spider webs and just like the middle of the jungle, and there's just no point at all. Like when you think about it, like they're gonna put it somewhere where the cameraman's gonna get it because they really don't want to film anything that's fake. Like they they have for me once have reshot something because they didn't get it, and like it just sucks. So like they just really don't want to get anything not in proper like live. So it's going to be somewhere where they can film it. So think something that's prominent. Think somewhere where the cameramen don't have to go far off a path, and then just sort of go from there. After that, it's just like you just check everything. Every time there's a new idol, you just check everything. Spend a couple hours and look through anything that looks cool. They're saying that, like, I thought there was so many cool things on Contenders Beach, and they put it in a tree and then in the shelter. I thought there was actually some awesome things they probably could have put it in instead, but smarter to put it closer to camp.
So the other question that I've got here for you is, you had a very short period between seasons. I believe it was 6 weeks before you went back to play the show again.
Yeah,
What do you believe
horrible.
were your advantages and disadvantages going into the season? And that's one part of the question. And then the second part is, did you actually talk to anybody that you played the game with the first time when you went back there? Were there like an unspoken rule that you guys were going to try and look out for each other, which obviously some people followed and other people didn't going into the season?
Well, like the 6 week thing, I would say it's like 95% negative. Like it sucked. And especially I really started to feel it because I played like basically 50 days the first time. Like I got voted out like it was like 4 a.m. of day 50. And so did 50 days there, and then 6 weeks at home, you like basically just try and get all your weight back on if you can, and then start playing. And I really felt it end of All Stars. Like it was just that horrible. My brain was just like not interested in Survivor anymore, which was kind of sad. I was like actually pretty okay with just leaving. Like when it came down to it being my time to go, I did fight, but I didn't fight as hard as I would have in season 4. Like, so it kind of destroyed my brain, basically. Body dealt okay, but not great. As for your other question, what was your other question? Sorry.
So the other question was like going back into this season. Obviously, you
Oh,
guys were the new
pre-gaming
kids
or
on the
anything?
blog. Yeah, was there any pre-gaming, any like trying to look out for each other out there on the island?
We did talk to each other enough to know who was going. I actually did something funny with Maddie Wahlberg where I asked Maddie Wahlberg to try and pre-game with some other players, and he actually did like go out and he was messing with people and like saying that he was going to be out there, and I just thought that was hilarious because he was saying he was going to be out there and it messed with other people's like ideas of who else would be in. We all thought Andy was going to be in it simply because he kind of went just like off the radar. And so we thought, oh, like Andy's there, especially because we thought, 6 from every season, which would have been fair. But they decided to go with 5 for season 1, 5 for season 4. There wasn't enough time to do any like pre-gaming or anything, or like really get to know people, which I think is good and bad. Like, it would be nice to have proper friends out there that you've made, but at the same time, I think it actually hindered some other people's games. Some people it benefited, definitely. Like, you've got people like Sean, Lydia, Mo, who were literally just never, ever, ever going to vote each other out, like ever. Like, there's just no chance. And so that is hugely valuable. But at the same time, people kind of do know about it. So if you got in the unlucky situation, then people would go after it. I also didn't have to feel too guilty about being a cold player in All-Stars. So I think that way it worked fine, because if you think about it, it restricts your movements if you have these people that you've kind of now known for 3 years, and you should probably vote them out, but you don't want to because you have this kind of bond. It's not necessarily a friendship, but it's they've been there for 3 years. So I think it was actually pretty liberating. I know for David, it definitely would have made the game easier because he just doesn't have the connections. He can just play a straight up game that's the best for him. And I sort of felt the same way. I could just kind of play the same. I also got very lucky that I actually started the game with John and Abby, who didn't necessarily play my game the same way that I didn't play their game. But there was a sort of unspoken thing when we started that we weren't going to target each other, because it's why would we? We've just spent the other season being friends. Why bother targeting each other when we can just always do it later? So that really benefited the start of my game, just having John and Abby there. But we didn't really put anything in place to sort of say, oh, you help me, I help you. Which ended up being good because it gave me flexibility to just vote Abby out when it was the right call to vote Abby out. I felt bad, but it was a lot easier not having spent years being friends.
Now, one of the things that stands out for me with Australian survivors, that whenever you guys get voted out, or when you, at least the way it looks like to us as viewers, is that you seem to forgive and forget a lot quicker in Australia, and you become mates afterwards. We see on Instagram you're hanging out with a bunch of your previous castmates and things like that. In the All-Star season, that changed somewhat with some of those. You don't need to name names, but that changed to some people that used to be friends for 3 years, and then they went out there and they got brutally betrayed by someone, and that sort of changed the dynamic between some of those players. Or was it still that people still appreciate that it was a game that was being played out there?
I think there were a couple people that did have hurt feelings that they had to kind of have chats after. And I actually did have to apologize to Shawnee for voting for her in the Exile Island bit. So some people take it personally and other people don't. As long as you're not being malicious, I think it's okay. I think the big difference again is that money. In Australian Survivor, you get money for first place and that's it. So it doesn't really matter if you get voted out 10th or if you get voted out 5th. The difference between that really doesn't matter in the long run. You're going to miss out on being on TV a little bit. That's it. You're not going to miss out on any money. If anything, you get a nicer jury villa holiday. Saying that, we went a bit crazy, because I was there for 3 weeks in All-Stars. So it's went a bit crazy.
But if you could choose, though, between your first experience and your second experience, because you went to the tail end or you went out first in the jury, which one of the two do you have more fond memories of between those two seasons? Or was it really hard to differentiate between them?
There's no comparison. The first time you play Survivor is that, and then the second time is kind of down here. Maybe I would have felt different if I won, but it was just what I would say to anyone that considers playing twice. It is not going to be as exciting. It's not going to be as fun. The downs definitely feel longer. So the first time, everything's fresh, everything's new, exciting. You don't know what to expect. And going into Jury Villa, I literally spent 3 hours in Jury Villa. It was get into Jury Villa at 6 a.m. That was literally my feast thing was at 5 or 6 a.m., something like that, because I got voted out so late. Stay out with John, have a few beers until breakfast time. And then I basically had to catch up on a few interviews and stuff. So the first day you get voted out, like you're basically still doing like a whole lot of stuff in front of camera. And so you do like all your final interviews to make sure that's all fine, exit interviews, and then I got asked if I wanted to play All Stars like midday that day after being voted out, and then you go and do final travel. So that was like a roller coaster, but it was so much fun. Like every part of that was just so fun. Having beers with John in the morning after I got voted out is one of my like favorite memories. I had Pop-Tarts in my jacket pocket at Final Travel Council, and I was just like eating them and giggling. And it was just so funny because it's like I hadn't had food in so long, and like I'd skipped a lot of the day. So I was like, that was like my first time just getting to like just be stupid and crazy. So the first time is just like worlds ahead of the second. Like no offense to anyone I played with in the second time, but the first one, just because it's all new, exciting, and it was just on the edge the whole time.
Now, if you were to have made the final in that season, would you have won against Baden and would you have won against Pierre? What do you think your chances would have been against either or of those? Sort of having had a discussion with people, I'm assuming in Jury Villa, they would have told you, hey, we were rooting for you, or we thought you'd have a chance. What's your sort of opinion about that?
Yeah, I never really got a chance to talk to people about the game very much at Jury Villa because, like I said, I just had a roller coaster day of filming and then basically like dinner and then final travel. And I actually left super early the next day for the mainland of Fiji. So I didn't get a chance to talk then, but like in hindsight, like I would have beaten Baden. I think like for some reason there was like a little bit of an opinion that he was kind of like the third out of the three of us. And then like I had very solid arguments for that final travel. Like I basically like thought out my arguments against Baden, which were good for me because my resume against his was already like a big speaking point. So I just needed to kind of hammer it in. So I think that would have been similar to Pia versus Baden, but maybe he gets a couple of social game votes because it was better than mine. Against Pia, I would say 5-4 probably to Pia, but maybe to me because I did have good arguments. And obviously she has her amazing final travel council and I don't. So it's like, in retrospect, it definitely looks like Pia wins, but we don't know without seeing my arguments because I essentially was going to use her relationship with Janine against them, especially like, I mean, in the actual episode, you see how much Janine just goes into bat for Pia, and that would have been a big detriment if I had my way against her. But I had other arguments as well. So I think I just lose to Pia unless I have like this amazing final travel and then I win.
Now, what was your highest point in the game, the move or the thing that you did in the game that you were the proudest of, and you sort of, you know, you look back fondly on that, and what was your lowest low? So I want to sort of know about both within the game.
Lowest low.
And either seasons.
I've got so many favorite memories. Like it's really hard to actually pinpoint. I'm gonna go. One of my favorites is definitely day 3, where we formed Cash Money, which was started with the first letter of each of our names: Casey, Andy, Sammy, Harry, and I just thought it was so awesome because day 3 we didn't have a challenge. It was just like this free day, and you could just kind of do whatever you wanted in the jungle. And it was the first day that we really played like strategy hard, like people going off and having conversations. We formed the alliance. Like I just thought it was like the best day ever, like playing like real Survivor, like no like messing around with the challenges or anything like that. Like this was like the actual hard stuff. So that is a favorite memory. I think it's kind of a subtle thing, but I really, really loved getting the second idol where everyone was in camp and I knew it was there. And it was like a whole process of things. Like it was just like a million emotions. It was just like this whirlpool of them because I just lied to Matt. Like I didn't tell him the full clue. I said that it was in the shelter, but I didn't say where when I knew it was in the roof. See it in the roof and like literally like just start getting butterflies because everyone's around. We're about to leave. And like I really wanted it then. And I don't know, it's just things just like turned over, get the flag, put it over it, which covers it, and it also puts me at the back of the line, because whoever holds the flag always goes at the back of the line when they're walking out in Survivor, and sort of like almost use like a production trick to like make it so that no one could be looking at me. And I just thought like that was so much fun. And I thought it was so smart, like just like laughing to myself as like they all turn around, walk out, and I grab an idol while they're literally just all standing there. So that's a fond memory as well. I mean, you could probably go through a whole bunch of them in season 4. I just love all the memories there. All Stars, what's the favorite memory there? I guess the very start of it was pretty fun because I was like back in the jungle and it was great the first like 2 days, and then getting my little one-liner against Shane Gould because I knew that she was after me as well. We were kind of like gunning for each other, and so I got that little one-liner. I was like, yeah, that's a good one. So maybe that is my favorite moment, voting out Shane Gould.
And any sort of, I'm assuming, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, that the lowest would probably have been not handing the advantage to Nick in All Stars, or do you not see that as something where you made a bit of a mistake there, or how do you see that move as a whole? I think you've spoken to that a little bit before, so I didn't really want to ask the question because I know you've had it before. I don't know if you've had a year to think about it since the last time you answered it.
There's more, I think the Nick one was more retrospect. Like, it's definitely like now that it's retrospect, like I hate that moment. Like, I wish I could have changed it. Not just because we had won. Like, even if like hypothetical, I still get voted out in the exact same spot, I would still like do the move because like it was one of the only times I didn't play to my mantra, which is like playing to win, not playing to just avoid losing. So that's my mantra, and that was like one of the only times I ever didn't stick to that, where I wasn't thinking about like the actual just all the way to number 1. I was thinking about just getting myself one step further. And so I regret it from that. Also, it would have been so cool like if I had have just like handed in, because I had it in my socks. Like I was 50-50 the whole time. Even when we walked out, I was 50-50 whether I just run back and just put it in his hands. But I had it in my socks, and I was thinking, what if he just walks in the exact same way Shawnee did with my socks? He walks the same way, like wearing my socks the next day. So a lot of regret there. Other low, like there was quite a lot towards the end of All Stars. There was a few lows just because like my mind was pretty broken. Like it's just what happens when you spend like 80 days in a jungle. Like you just start to like get a bit fried. So there was some bad days there. There was some days where I just kind of had like some breakdowns, and I was kind of glad they didn't really like show any of the edit. But yeah, like some of the stuff gets edited out, and so it's like sometimes it seems like super lovey and like easy and happy, and like people are like, oh, Survivor's not hard like it used to be. It's like, no, they just edit out the mental breakdowns because it's unappealing to a viewer. Like only a certain hardcore viewer actually wants to see that stuff. And there's plenty of other shows that can show us that now. Like go watch like Naked and Afraid or Alone or something if you want to see people suffering in the wilderness. Like Survivor is hard, but they don't need to show it anymore.
And the Australian Survivor, I take my hat off to you guys. You play that game for 50 days. Some have played it for 55 days, Luke's first season, and I think the first season ever of it. And then, you know, you're looking at the US Survivor seasons now. There's rumors out there that it might be going down to 29 days opposed to 39 days for the next season. So it is interesting. I don't think it will take away from the entertainment value of the game at its core and how it's being played, but some people will be very protective of that. And that would be basically almost half the time that you guys are out there. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, you know, it sounds like, you know, obviously the second time out there was a really tough experience for you, just like probably physically, emotionally, and everything being out there mentally, having been sort of separated from your girlfriend for such a long time as well, which would have definitely played on your mind. Does this sort of weigh heavily on you when it comes to considering the possibility of playing this game in the future? Because I really do think that, you know, another big legendary type, like, and I do think international versus US is going to happen. I've spoken to a lot of survivors in South Africa who really wants it to happen. I've spoken to you and Luke. Both you and Luke seem to be keen on something like that. I think that at some stage, hopefully something like this will happen. Does it make it really
I
hard for
would
you
I would
to
play in a
consider it.
second.
So,
Yeah,
so
I
you
would play
definitely
in
would
a
do that.
second.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there any other
I'm
theme
not.
that you would like to play, like outside of that, or not so much? You're more interested in that type of
Well,
season.
no, like put me on any of them. Put me on
Yeah.
heroes versus villains. I'll be a hero. Um, so I for this year and maybe next year, I think I would maybe say no to being put on. But after that, I would probably go on. It'd be kind of cool to have that age difference and see if it does anything to make me maybe a little bit smarter. No, I'd play again. Just give me a few years. If it was international, I would do it at any point. But yeah, I think for the good of the show, I think they need to do like at least 5 or 6 more seasons of just give me newbies. Like that's all I want. I want new players so that if there is like another repeat season, it's not just like me, Luke, and David just like hogging up all the airtime.
Yeah, I know, 100% agree. Now, one last question for you. If you could change anything about Australian Survivor and the way that it is currently, what would it be and why?
Change the non-eliminations. And I think it's a really difficult one. Like I know there's podcasts out there that have like specifically just talked about getting rid of non-eliminations or ways to get around it. I think I kind of got lucky in the like champions versus contenders. Like they actually felt kind of okay. They didn't feel like the worst. But it's a complication in the game that doesn't need to be there. And like to be honest, like I feel like if you're having like 2 less episodes, like obviously there's like the relationship with Channel 10 and that kind of thing that needs to be upheld, but it's like I don't really feel like the show suffers from being 2 less episodes. Like I think you get a lot of value out of providing a quality product. So I would get rid of the non-eliminations.
What about like
or at
hidden
least
scenes? Like, we have these podcasts literally to talk to you about things that never made the TV show. So what about like hidden scenes on some of those episodes or something to be creative? If you wanted to look at it differently.
If I was going to do like a positive change, yeah, I would definitely have a look into maybe some raw footage. Like if I was going to do something super positive, not like 24-hour raw footage, but like just for hypothetical sense, like literally just get like just a static camera on a camp and just have like a 1 hour, 1.5 hour raw footage just so people can kind of get a gauge. Maybe do it in a storm. And so people can literally just watch us like stand there for an hour and a half and they'll be like, oh, these people aren't sleeping. It's like 3 a.m. in the morning and they're just standing under the tarp for an hour and a half. And it's like, I feel like for the hardcore fans, who's what the extra footage would be directed at, I think some of them would really get a kick out of some raw footage, like full conversations with no editing, see storms come in and like what happens. Maybe that as like a creative thing for YouTube or something else.
No, 100%. Now, Harry, is there anything that you would like to shout out there for the fans? Anything that you're working on currently you want to bring some attention to? Do you still have the ice cream shop at the moment? I think that's the number one question.
Yeah, I was there today. I was there working, making cookie dough and ice cream bases. So, yeah, if you're in Perth, come down to Cool, K-U-L-D. That's how it's spelled. You can find us in Fremantle and Beaufort Street if you're in Perth. Other than that, man, I've just been chilling. Like I've just like sort of like been off Instagram for a while, just kind of doing my own thing, living life. But the other thing I'll say to fans is don't be discouraged by like auditioning and that sort of stuff. That's what's sort of like the thing at the moment. Don't get real paranoid about it or that sort of thing. I say put your audition in every single time, do it, forget about it, and make your life more exciting, because that's what I was doing before I got put on the show. Was like you apply, but then you go, hey, like there's other opportunities out there. Just find opportunities, and then all of a sudden, like a year later, you're a more like entertaining person because you've like done that job or because you went and did that like hobby, you went traveling, that sort of thing. But like I got put on as the ice cream guy, And the only reason that I had that character is because I went through all these opportunities that eventually led to that job. So put in your application and then go make your life more exciting, because the more exciting you make it, it's fun and you're going to get on TV later. So that's my thing to throw out to people right now.
I love it. I love it. How many times did you apply for the show before you actually got accepted?
Twice. So the second time I got accepted, the first time I got like, I think it was like one call, and then I knew that I botched the call and I was like really boring, and they never called again. The second time I had just a way better story from everything, because I went out there, like I worked at a summer camp in America. I had this ice cream job. I had 3 other jobs. I was just doing so much stuff, and you just get to the point where you're not really deniable. You're undeniable because you're like this character.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
I think that's what I did. I think that's why I got on, is just because I was just this character and it was just so easy. And like I said, if you want an analogy, it is like wrestling. Like if I don't understand your character, and if a 10-year-old especially doesn't understand your character, who you are, in like a minute or two, then you don't have a good enough character for TV. You need a better one. So that's my parting words for people applying.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Harry, for your time today. It's been great talking to you. Stay on for one sec while I hang up here, and I will show you how we're going to share the link. Guys, if you like this content, we're hopefully going to bring some more Australian survivors onto the show in the near future. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we will be back shortly. We are currently doing a Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets rewatch series, and we will be joined by Meryl this weekend to talk about her elimination episode, and I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with her. So stay tuned for that, guys, and see you next time.
Bye.